Hi, my name is Delphine, and not too long ago, my own son locked me out of the house I paid for, drained my pension, and then smiled like nothing ever happened. He said it was just paperwork. He said, "You'll always have a place here, Mom." But now, I'm living in a rented room with peeling paint while he throws a wedding in my name, without my name. And the worst part? The people clapping for him have no idea what he took. What would you do if your child erased you from your own life and expected you to show up and applaud? I had only been gone 2 days. A simple overnight stay at the hospital after my blood pressure spiked while walking home from the store. The nurse said it was stress, though she didn't know the half of it. I returned on a crisp mid-autumn morning, the kind of Texas morning where the sun is gentle, not yet cruel, and the wind carries a false promise of peace. My front porch looked exactly as I'd left it. The same worn doormat, the geraniums clinging to life in their chipped pots, and the wind chime I bought at a flea market last Christmas, swinging in slow circles. I reached into my purse for my keys, still warm from my palm, slid one in. It didn't turn. I paused, tried again, firmer this time. Nothing. I pulled back, examined the lock, looked the same. Tried another key, then back to the first. Still no give. At first, I thought maybe the lock was jammed. Maybe the heat had warped the metal. But after the fourth attempt, that soft nudge of dread pressed in. My house, my home, wasn't letting me in. There was no note taped to the door, no missed call on my phone. Just silence, as if I'd ceased to exist in that space altogether. I knocked. No answer. Again, harder this time. The second knock echoed longer than the first. A window shade twitched across the street. Mrs. Palmer, my neighbor, peeked from behind her curtain. Our eyes met for half a second before she vanished like a ghost caught under daylight. She knew something. "You'll always have a place here, Mom." That's what Dorian said just last week when I'd asked if I should stay at a hotel after the hospital. His voice had been smooth, warm, like a salesman selling you something that felt a little too good. I should have listened to that knot in my stomach. My phone vibrated in my bag. "Dorian," I answered. "Hey, Mom, everything okay? You out of the hospital?" "Yes," I said slowly, my voice cracking more than I wanted it to. "Great! Listen, Sable and I were just talking. Could you help coordinate the florist details for the reception? She's a little swamped with dress fittings, and her parents flying in from Denver." I blinked. He was breezing past everything. "Dorian," I said, cautious, "I'm standing on the porch. The key doesn't work." A pause. Then, "Oh? Huh. Maybe the locks were changed. Security, you know. I'll check with Sable." That was it. No shock, no apology. Just a flimsy excuse tossed like a bone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just said, "I'll see what I can do about the florist," and hung up. I stepped back, picked up my suitcase, old, beige, the kind with wheels that always jam, and dragged it down the 3 concrete steps. The thunk it made against the bottom one sounded louder than expected, but nobody opened a door. I didn't know where I was going. I just walked. Ended up at the nearest bus stop, half a mile away, clutching the handle of that stubborn suitcase like it was the last thing tethering me to something real. As I sat on the worn metal bench, staring at a cracked patch of sidewalk, my mind wandered back to the preschool drop-offs. Dorian used to cry when I left, arms outstretched, begging me not to go. I'd always reassure him, promise I'd come back. I always did. Funny how things flip. I started pulling apart the last 6 months in my head. The day he asked to add his name to the house deed, just in case something happened. The dwindling mail, bills that stopped coming to my name. The power company switching to paperless without telling me. The subtle shift from Mom's house to our place. He hadn't kicked me out in one blow. He chipped away, quietly. I handed him each tool without realizing it. Trust. Love. The benefit of the doubt. My phone buzzed again. A text from him this time. "Hope you're okay. Don't forget about the cake tasting Thursday. Sable's really counting on you." I didn't reply. Just hit delete and slid the phone back into my purse. The wind picked up. I looked up, eyes squinting at the light slicing through oak branches above, and I said it out loud, quiet, almost to myself, but firm enough to settle something inside. I'm not going back. The first thing I noticed when I woke up was the sound of the faucet. Drip, drip, drip. I'd tried stuffing a tissue into the spout the night before, but it hadn't helped. This place wasn't a home. It was a borrowed corner of someone else's building. The mattress sagged in the middle, the wallpaper curled at the edges. And yet, the only thing that felt truly mine was my purse, zipped and pressed close to me like a shield while I slept. The morning sun poured through the cheap blinds with an honesty I wasn't ready for. There was no pretense in its light. It didn't soften the corners or hide the flaws. It just showed me exactly where I was. I sat up, bones stiff, and reached for my phone. Notifications blinked. Junk mail. One missed call from the bank's fraud alert line. I froze, opened my banking app, another withdrawal. He was still using the account. I had added Dorian to that account years ago, back when I was going through chemo, and I worried I might not be able to get to the bank. It's just in case, baby, I told him. If anything happens to me, you'll have what you need to keep things running. That was back when I still believed in backup plans. Now it was his personal ATM. I stared at the balance. The number on the screen didn't scare me. It was the principle. I hadn't touched that account since I moved out. And yet, every few days, a few $100s vanished. Groceries, wedding expenses, spa day for Sable? I didn't know. And the worst part? I hadn't stopped it. Not yet. There was a knock at the door, not sharp, friendly. I slid my feet into the hotel slippers I'd stolen from my hospital stay and opened it. A woman in scrubs stood holding a cardboard box. "Delivery for Delphine Carter," she smiled. "Your son must really care. This is heavy." She set the box down and disappeared before I could form words. I carried it inside, shut the door with my hip, and stared at the box on the table. There was a label with my name, a shiny ribbon, a small envelope tucked under the bow. My fingers trembled slightly as I pulled it free. "Stay strong, Mom. Can't wait to see you at the wedding. Love, Dorian." Inside the box, protein shakes, 2 pairs of orthopedic slippers, a silk eye mask, lavender body lotion, a bottle of multivitamins, a pre-packaged gift basket curated for wellness and aging with dignity. I stood there, staring at it. Not one thing I needed. Not one thing he'd asked me about. And yet, somehow, he'd managed to say everything. The insult wasn't loud. It was subtle, padded in pastel packaging. It whispered, "You're not a mother. You're a task, a pity project." Where was this energy when I sat on the porch last week, key in hand, shut out like a stranger? Where was this kindness when I waited at the bus stop, clutching a suitcase, wondering where to go? Where was this support when I called and said the lock didn't work, and he told me, "Oh, I'll check with Sable"? I looked down at the lotion bottle in my hand. Something about the phrase on it, "for mature skin," made my lip curl. I'd given him everything, my time, my body, my savings, my house. And now, I got back vitamins and scented lotion. I grabbed my phone, opened a new message to Dorian. "Thank you for the package. I hope the house is comfortable." I stared at the words. My thumb hovered over send. Then, slowly, I hit backspace. One letter at a time. I closed the message without saving it. There was no point in pretending I was thankful. I wasn't. And I was done sending polite lies to a child who'd learned to weaponize kindness. The rest of the day passed in muted silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't slam drawers. I just moved about the room with the kind of precision that comes after you've been hit too many times in the same spot. I folded the blanket, washed the cup I'd used, straightened the basket, but didn't touch its contents again. That night, under the yellowed light of the bedside lamp, I opened the drawer and pulled out the manila envelope. Inside were the pension documents. Originals. Signed and filed years ago when I still thought Dorian would be the one to call the ambulance, not the locksmith. I slid the pages out carefully. I had skimmed them before, never read line by line. That was about to change, because now it wasn't just about what he took. It was about what I was about to take back. The scent of instant coffee still reminded me of that morning. Dorian had made it just the way I liked. 2 sugars, a splash of oat milk, and placed the mug on the table with a soft smile. It was the kind of gesture that made a mother proud. He was wearing a navy sweater, one I'd gifted him a Christmas or 2 ago, and he looked every bit the grown man I thought I'd raised right. That morning, I felt proud, safe, needed. "Just paperwork, Mom," he said gently. "You're not going anywhere." We were at the kitchen table, the one I'd once sanded and stained myself. He laid out the pages in a neat stack, sliding them toward me like he was dealing cards. His tone was calm, measured. He told me it was for future clarity, just a formality to make sure things were clean and simple in case anything ever happened. I remember asking once, "Are you sure this won't change anything?" And he smiled again, nodding. The notary arrived 10 minutes later. She was young, polite, and unaware of the weight in that room. I signed, hand trembling slightly, but brushed it off as nerves. Dorian kissed the top of my head afterward. "You're the best, Mom. Always have been." And then he left to pick up Sable. I bought cupcakes that afternoon. 1 chocolate, 1 lemon. His favorite and mine. I placed them in the fridge side by side, as if that small act would seal our bond. I never got to eat mine. Now, weeks later, I sat at the edge of a rented twin bed, the same manila folder from the other night resting on my knees. The pages inside were crisp. My signature, bold and trusting, stared back at me. His name was now listed first. Mine, secondary. I didn't cry. Not anymore. I'd done enough of that. The silence in the room was broken by my phone buzzing. I hesitated before answering. "Delphine?" The voice on the line was familiar, soft, hesitant. "Nadine." "Nadine, is everything okay?" There was a pause. "I shouldn't be calling," she said, "but I saw something, heard something, and I couldn't keep it to myself." I leaned forward slightly. "Go on," she exhaled. "After you left the house, I came in for the cleaning I still do every other week. Dorian didn't see me at first. He was in the kitchen with Sable, talking to her mother. I heard him say, clear as day, she was just useful for her signature. We needed the house in our name for the premarital assets. Clean slate." My stomach clenched. I gripped the phone harder. "I'm sorry," Nadine said, her voice small. "You deserve to know." "Thank you," I replied. "That means more than you think." When I hung up, I sat for a long while, unmoving. His words echoed, cold and calculated. Not emotional, not impulsive, planned. I pulled the deed from the folder, placed it on the table, and stared. The date, the notary seal. My name, quietly displaced. I remembered walking to the bakery after signing, thinking I'd done something smart, something maternal. I had no idea I'd signed my own eviction. The betrayal wasn't just in the action, it was in how long he'd been rehearsing it. Later that evening, I borrowed the front desk's Wi-Fi and opened the browser on my old phone. It took a minute to load, but I didn't rush. I searched for property law in Texas, found a few sites that broke it down. I started scribbling notes into a notebook I'd picked up from the dollar store. Ownership, revocation, fraud by coercion. My handwriting looked steadier than I felt. I wasn't ready to act, not yet, but I was done standing still. That night, before bed, I placed the deed back in its folder. On the outside, I wrote in block letters, evidence, not just of what he did, but of who I'd been when I let him do it. I don't remember falling. One moment, I was reaching for a can of beans in the grocery aisle, and the next, I was on the cold tile floor, someone calling out, "Ma'am, are you okay?" My vision had gone fuzzy around the edges. The sounds were muffled. A stranger's hand steadied me. Then the world faded into a spinning blur. I came to an urgent care clinic. The fluorescent lights overhead were sharp, too white, too sterile. I heard beeping somewhere nearby and the rustle of someone's jacket as they passed. A nurse helped me sit up, handed me a cup of water. She asked if I had insurance. I nodded, dug into my purse, and handed her the familiar blue card I'd used for years. She stepped away to scan it. I watched her eyebrows knit together as she typed. Her expression shifted from neutral to confused, and then to that careful concern professionals wear when they're about to deliver bad news. "This policy, it was canceled last month," she said gently. "Do you have another card?" I shook my head slowly. "That's the only one I've ever had." I don't remember how long I sat on that examination table. My mind kept replaying Dorian's voice from 2 years ago. "Mom, don't worry about any of that. I've got your insurance set up. You're covered. You'll always be covered." The irony hit like a second blow. I looked down at the paper gown they'd handed me, the thin fabric clinging to my knees. I was vulnerable in every possible way. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. Tried again. Still nothing. A nurse entered quietly and handed me the bill. Over $300 for the visit, fluids, and lab tests. I held the paper in my lap, hands still trembling. Not from the low blood sugar anymore, but from a growing, contained fury. Back at the boarding house, I let the door shut softly behind me. I didn't turn on the light. I just moved to the small desk near the window and pulled out the evidence folder. I began flipping through the pile. Old utility bills, the deed, tax statements, and then I found it. A form with both our names, dated a year ago. My signature scribbled at the bottom. I didn't remember signing it, but I did remember the day he brought over a stack of renewal forms, said it was just to update addresses. "Nothing changes, Mom," he said. "It's just a formality." In the tiny text below, it authorized Dorian as my primary contact and gave him full control over my health insurance administration, including the right to cancel and replace policies as needed. He hadn't just locked me out of my home. He'd shut me out of my own safety net. I leaned back in the chair, trying to breathe evenly, but it came in short, shallow bursts. It wasn't just the act, it was the planning, the precision, the calm delivery of lies wrapped in routine. Trying to shake it off, I reached for another file folder. I kept important papers together, receipts, photocopies of my driver's license, and an old life insurance policy I'd taken out decades ago when Dorian was still in middle school. It had always named Odessa as the secondary beneficiary, just in case anything ever happened to Dorian. I opened it now, out of habit more than anything, and I froze. In bold, updated type, primary beneficiary, Dorian Carter. No secondary listed, no authorization form, no communication, no memory of this change. He had replaced even that. He hadn't just taken my roof. He'd taken the ground beneath it, quietly, legally, like a ghost slipping through the cracks of a life I thought I still owned. I whispered to myself, the words barely forming in my throat. He didn't just kick me out, he replaced me, before I even knew I was gone. Every choice I'd made, every allowance, every time I said yes out of love, suddenly felt like a weapon I'd handed him. I didn't cry. My tears had run dry in earlier chapters of this story. But something inside me shifted. Not loudly, not in flames, just a cold, precise crack, like ice breaking underfoot. I pulled my laptop out of the bottom drawer, plugged it in, and opened my email. Typed in the address for a local legal aid clinic I'd bookmarked months ago, but never used. Subject line, urgent, health and life insurance inquiry. Body, I need to understand my legal rights regarding revoked health policies and unauthorized life insurance changes. Please advise on next steps. I clicked send. He may have erased me from documents, but I still exist in every memory he's tried to rewrite. The envelope was heavier than I expected. Cream-colored, thick like it had something important to say. Gilded along the edges, with my name printed in elegant cursive. but something about it made my palms go cold before I even opened it. I sat at the edge of my bed, the spring creaking beneath me, and peeled the envelope open with care I didn't feel. Inside was a card that matched the envelope, embossed, beautifully laid out. Every detail screamed celebration. Until I read the recipient line, "Guest of Mr. Arthur." Arthur, my late husband, dead 10 years now. And still, in this twisted rewriting of history, I was no longer myself. I was an accessory to a ghost. My chest tightened, not from sadness, but from sheer indignation. I flipped the card over, hoping it was some oversight, maybe a formatting error or a glitch in the printer. But no, my name was nowhere, not once, not even in the RSVP section, just guest of Mr. Arthur. It wasn't just careless, it was deliberate. I placed the card on the nightstand like it was hot. The air in the room shifted, my name erased in gold foil. My place at the wedding reduced to a +1 for a man buried in Fort Worth's oldest cemetery. That afternoon, I sat at the window with the invitation propped open beside me and let my memory walk back to a phone call from months ago. Sable, chirpy, and rehearsed, calling to run a few things by me. We're leaning toward a classic aesthetic, clean, timeless, white roses and navy, minimalism, but elevated. I'd smiled politely then, not fully grasping what she was really saying. We just want everything to feel intentional, you know? Like nothing's out of place. Out of place. Like a 66-year-old mother who still carried scars from chemo. Like the woman who gave birth to the groom but wasn't sleek enough for the seating chart. I remembered asking, "Do you want me there, Sable?" There'd been a pause, too long for comfort, followed by a half laugh. "Of course, Delphine, of course." Now, sitting with the proof in hand, I knew exactly what she meant. That night, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife deeper, an email popped into my inbox. Sent by mistake. Not to me, but to someone named Melissa. Forwarded along a chain of replies from the wedding planner. We should keep Delphine's presence low profile. Maybe back row, stage left, nothing front and center. Sable's note added underneath, "We don't want her look to disturb the aesthetic. Let's keep things clean." I stared at the screen so long, the light from the phone blurred into a dull haze. My look, as if my face, the one Dorian used to draw with crayons when he was 6, was now a liability to their Pinterest board. They wanted me to be there, quietly, unseen, forgotten. I opened a new email, typed Dorian's name in the address bar. My fingers hovered over the keys. I started one draft, rage-filled, sharp like broken glass. I deleted it. Started again. This one gentler, but tired. You could have told me that I didn't fit into the picture anymore. I deleted that one too. I pulled out an envelope from the drawer, wrote his name in pen across the front, placed a blank card inside. Not to send, just to remind myself that silence can say everything. I laid the wedding invitation beside it, pulled out the RSVP card. Where it said Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I drew a thick red line through the name, Guest of Mr. Arthur. And underneath it, in my handwriting, bold, all caps, I wrote, Delphine Carter, not someone's +1, not a ghost's companion, not a mother in the shadows. If they wouldn't give me my name, I'd take it back myself. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I simply got dressed, folded the letter twice, slipped it into a plain white envelope, and made my way to the resort where the rehearsal dinner was being held. The drive from Fort Worth to Austin was quiet. No music, no news, just the rhythm of tires on asphalt and the low murmur of my own thoughts, steady as a heartbeat. I arrived early. Not too early to raise alarms, just early enough to catch them unguarded. The sky above the hilltop resort was powder blue, the kind that weddings love. The wind carried hints of lavender from the hedges, softening the air, but not my steps. The venue was every bit as polished as Sable had promised. Reclaimed wood beams, polished stone floors, strings of fairy lights glowing before dusk. Guests in linen and silk sipped wine, and complemented each other's shoes. I walked in wearing a gray suit, clean, simple, unbranded. The envelope tucked under my arm might as well have been a grenade. No one greeted me. Some didn't recognize me at first. Others pretended not to. I walked straight to the memory table near the entrance. There, among baby photos of Dorian, college memorabilia, and a miniature replica of their future home, sat a porcelain jewelry box. I knew it instantly. It was mine. Sold at a pawn shop 3 years ago when I couldn't cover rent and groceries in the same month. The floral inlay, the chipped corner I'd glued back together, the small crack beneath the lid. Undeniably mine. I'd saved for months to buy that piece during a weekend trip with Arthur when Dorian was a toddler. Now, a printed tag lay beside it. Gift from Sable's godmother. A server passed by. "Beautiful piece, huh?" she said. "They said it's a family heirloom." I nodded. It was. Dorian spotted me as I turned away. He walked over quickly, smile forced, jaw tight. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming." "Did you RSVP?" he asked, as if I was a stranger who'd crashed the party. "I did," I said quietly, handing him the envelope. "Just not to the part you expected." He glanced around before opening it. His eyes scanned the page. The smile vanished. Inside was a notarized statement removing him as the beneficiary of my will, pension, and life insurance. Legal, final, sealed. "You're serious," he whispered, voice cracking. I didn't blink. "You made a decision. This is mine." He said nothing. The silence between us had more weight than anything we'd said in years. The moment hung in the air until I turned toward the memory table again. Raising my voice just enough for nearby guests to hear, I pointed at the jewelry box. "That belonged to me. I sold it to survive. Now it's displayed as someone else's history." I didn't wait for the reaction. I walked out of the reception, past the fairy lights, down the gravel path to my car. I didn't hear gasps. No one stopped me. But I felt the eyes. I felt the shift, the whispers beginning just as the wooden doors closed behind me. Back at my hotel, I slipped off the jacket and sat at the small desk. The room smelled faintly of lemon-scented cleaner and fresh linen. I pulled out a notebook, blank, smooth, waiting. On the first page, I wrote, Chapter 1, What I Kept When They Took Everything Else. Because memory isn't what we give others. It's what we protect when they try to erase us. The sky was still soft with early light when I arrived at the venue. The garden buzzed with chatter, guests in tailored suits and pastel dresses sipping champagne and complimenting centerpieces. The kind of scene designed to be photographed, filtered, and remembered fondly. I walked in from the side entrance, unnoticed at first. My shoes didn't click loudly on the stone path, and my suit, gray, pressed quiet, matched the overcast sky behind me. I carried a small black portfolio under my arm. It wasn't flashy, but it was sharp, like everything else I had brought with me that morning. Dorian stood near the arch of white hydrangeas, his back straight, smiling for the photographer. Sable clung to his arm like a second accessory. A notary sat at a small table nearby, flipping through legal documents. Pre-marital agreements, asset declarations, everything crisp and ready. I stepped forward before the pen touched paper. "Excuse me?" I said. Calm, measured, loud enough for the witnesses to pause. All heads turned. "I have a document of my own to submit." Dorian's smile cracked. "Mom, what are you?" I ignored him. Walked to the notary, handed over my envelope. She opened it, brows furrowing as she read. It was official, notarized, irrevocable. I had removed Dorian as my financial proxy, no longer listed on my will, pension, or insurance policies. The signatures were clear. The date was recent. Dorian took a step closer. "What is this?" His voice was tight, not yet loud but strained. I met his eyes for the first time that morning. I signed my part. "You just didn't know." He blinked. "You planned this?" "You planned yours. I planned mine." Gasps rippled. I caught Odessa in the crowd, standing still with her mouth slightly open. Sable tried to maintain composure, but her hand, wrapped around her wine glass, trembled visibly. The officiant shifted awkwardly in her seat. The notary closed the folder slowly. "I'm sure this is something we can discuss after," Dorian began, but I was already walking away. No raised voice, no outburst, just a clean, deliberate exit. I didn't stop to see the aftermath. I didn't need to. The whispers would outlive the moment. Outside, the air was thicker, warmer. I walked past rows of parked cars, past the valet who gave me a small, respectful nod, past the memory table where my old jewelry box still sat under someone else's name. I got into my car, rolled down the windows, and took one deep, honest breath. Back at my hotel room, the light had shifted from morning gold to the pale blue of noon. I kicked off my shoes and sat down at the nightstand where my phone buzzed with another message from Dorian. I didn't open it. Instead, I scrolled to my contacts list. My emergency contact still read Dorian Carter. I tapped it. Deleted. Then I typed a new name. Odessa Lane. The screen blinked for a moment before saving. Sometimes the most powerful goodbye isn't the one you shout, it's the one you never have to say out loud. The lights dimmed just enough to make everyone lean in, wine glasses halfway to their lips, the hum of conversation dissolving into polite silence. A hush swept across the ballroom. Candles flickered in their glass holders. Somewhere in the background, a curated playlist melted into a cinematic swell of strings. I stood off to the side near the back, far from the head table, but not so hidden I couldn't be seen. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I just wanted to be present, and this time, that was enough. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "we now invite you to enjoy a special video tribute to the bride and groom. Memories, milestones, and moments shared with family." The projector screen came to life in front of the band stage. Laughter rose as the first slide appeared. A baby photo of Dorian, all cheeks and curls, wrapped in a blue blanket. The room cooed. Then came birthdays, school recitals, soccer trophies. Dorian at prom, Dorian at college graduation, Dorian holding Sable's hand at a vineyard. Each image slickly edited, brightened and framed in gold. There were group shots, family picnics, holiday dinners. But in the few where I did appear, I was conveniently blurry. Cropped. Once, only my hand resting on Dorian's shoulder remained in frame. The rest of me faded out like an afterthought. I didn't flinch. I'd prepared for this. Then the screen glitched. For a moment, it went black. Someone murmured. Then a new clip started playing. Grainy, not color-corrected. Clearly not part of the edited reel. I knew it immediately. We were in the old backyard. I was younger, wearing a faded sun hat. Dorian couldn't have been more than 5, holding a toy fire truck in one hand and a juice box in the other. The camera wobbled as I pulled him onto my lap and looked into his eyes. "Promise me," my voice said on the tape, "no matter how far you go, you'll never push me out of your life." Dorian looked up at me, his eyes wide and solemn. "I promise, Mommy." The room went still. You could hear a pin drop, or maybe the breath I didn't take. No one moved. Someone coughed. A fork clinked against a plate. The DJ, red-faced, rushed to his equipment, fumbling for the remote. But it was too late. The words hung in the air, heavier than any toast. The screen went black again. The lights came up a bit. People shifted in their seats, eyes darting to the head table. Sable smiled thinly, trying to recover the mood. Dorian's face was pale, his jaw tight. I stayed exactly where I was. I didn't need to say anything. Odessa stood slowly near the champagne tower. She held up her glass. Not high, not showy, just enough. "To the people we came from," she said, her voice steady, "especially the ones who weren't meant to be forgotten." The clinking of glasses was hesitant at first. Then, a few more followed. Not everyone, but enough. She turned to find me in the crowd, met my eyes, and nodded. I returned it, slow and quiet. No one needed an explanation. The truth had already spoken for itself. Later that night, after the last slice of cake had been plated and the final song had played, I slipped out through the side terrace. The air was cooler now. A breeze carried the scent of jasmine from the garden hedges. My shoes crunched lightly against the gravel as I walked toward the edge of the driveway, where the cars lined up for valet. I didn't feel victorious. Not exactly, but I did feel seen. And that was something. I took one long look back at the glowing windows of the ballroom before turning away. No drama, no confrontation, just the knowledge that for one brief, undeniable moment, everyone had heard the voice of the mother they tried to mute. Back in my room, I changed into cotton pajamas and poured a glass of water. I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd started earlier that week, and opened to the first page. Beneath my earlier title, Chapter 1, What I Kept When They Took Everything Else, I added a new line. Tonight, I wasn't in the video, but I was in the story. The key turned smoothly in the lock. No resistance, no hesitation. Just a soft click, and I was inside. My new apartment wasn't much. One bedroom, pale walls, floors that creaked when I walked too quickly. But it was mine. The living room held only a second-hand couch and a lamp with a crooked shade. But it didn't matter. For the first time in months, maybe years, I stepped into a space that didn't already carry someone else's version of me. There were no photos on the walls yet, no memories echoing off corners. And that, somehow, brought more peace than silence ever had. I dropped my purse on the small table by the door, kicked off my shoes, and took a long breath that didn't need to be masked by a smile. In the middle of the living room sat the cardboard box, taped neatly, labeled in thick black marker, closed. Inside were documents that had carried me through every courtroom, every conversation with lawyers, every late-night moment of doubt. Bank statements, legal notices, letters I'd written but never sent, a worn envelope with Dorian's name scratched out in heavy pen. I'd kept them close for protection, proof that what had happened wasn't just in my head. But today, they didn't feel like armor anymore. Today, they were just paper. I sealed the box with a final strip of tape, pressed it down hard, and slid it beneath the bed. Not gone, not erased, but no longer something I needed to carry in the daylight. Later that afternoon, while reheating some leftover soup, my phone buzzed. I expected silence. Or maybe another message from some lawyer reminding me of clauses I already understood. But the name on the screen made me pause. Odessa. I answered on the second ring. "Hey, Dee Dee," she said, her voice softer than usual. "You home?" "I am now," I said. A pause. "I just wanted to say, I don't know what's going to happen with them. I'm not calling to explain them. But I see you. I've seen you the whole time." The tears that welled in my eyes weren't from pain, not this time. "Thank you," I whispered. "You taught me something," she said, "about strength, not the kind that shouts, the kind that stays, that refuses to vanish." We didn't talk long. We didn't need to. When we hung up, I stayed with the stillness, not rushing to fill it. It felt earned. That night, I pulled out a notepad and wrote a letter. Not to Dorian, not to the world, just to myself. I was your mother before you had a name. You were my home before I ever owned one. And now, I am mine. I folded the note and placed it in a small drawer labeled Truths, not for proof, for remembrance. The next morning, I slipped on a light sweater and walked to the cafe 2 blocks down. The barista recognized me. "Cinnamon tea and oat muffin?" "Still my favorite," I smiled. I took a seat by the window. Outside, cars rolled by, people rushed to work. Life continued with or without anyone's permission. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to shrink to fit into someone else's story. I watched the steam rise from my tea. Let it blur the glass just enough to soften the world. I wasn't waiting for apologies anymore. I wasn't hoping for recognition. I had survived what they tried to bury, and what remained had roots. I was erased in ink, in images, in stories they told. But I still exist. And now, I live loudly, in peace. What they took from me, my home, my name, my place in the story, never defined who I truly was. I learned the hard way that being quiet doesn't mean you're invisible, and trusting doesn't mean you're weak. Sometimes, it's the ones we love the most who teach us what survival really looks like. If you've ever felt pushed aside, unheard, or erased from your own life, know this: you can still write the next chapter. It's never too late to reclaim your space, your voice, your dignity. I didn't fight back with anger. I rebuilt with clarity. And that's what I want for you too. So now I ask you, have you ever had to walk away from the people who should have protected you? What did it take to find your peace? If this story touched something in you, leave a comment with a 1, or share where you're watching from. If it challenged you or even made you uncomfortable, tell me why. Let's start a conversation. And if you want more stories like this, raw, honest, and deeply human, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what comes next.